You know that little boys aren't supposed to go into strange rooms with men they just met, right? When I was 10, I knew this too. But I was a huge video game nerd. In the 1980s, if you wanted to play video games, you had to go to an arcade somewhere. Maybe the mall. The arcade had a wide array of games in the lobby area, but the best games were hidden in a secret room at the back of the store. I'd heard about it from other boys at the school. They said that if you spent a lot of time and corners playing video games on the main floor, the owner, Stanley, would take you into the back room where the secret games were kept. The guys said that Stanley got access to the arcade games months before they came out. It was also rumored that there were some games in the back room that were too risque for the main floor. Weird underground video games from Japan that involved sex and gore. I had been coming to the arcade with my friends for over a month, but Stanley never showed any interest in me until I came by myself one day. You have to understand that this was a safe, quaint college town in the 1980s. Things were different. Moms would drop their kids off at the mall, armed with only stern warnings about talking to strangers, and leave them there for hours. Everyone did this. It wasn't neglectful. As I was playing Street Fighter, Stanley approached me. "You've got a lot of time on that game there." I was a little shocked that he was right here. I'd seen him around the store, but never this close. It was like seeing a celebrity in person for the first time. "Yeah, I've almost gotten a high score 3 times. "You want to play some other games in the back?" he asked. And that was it. It was like he had asked me if I wanted $1 million. I backed away from my game, right in the middle of a hard level, and said, "Yes." Right away, no hesitation. That's how stupid I was. As he led me back through the game room lobby, he asked, "Has anyone told you about the back room?" I didn't want to get anyone in trouble for telling the secret. He promised that they wouldn't get in trouble. He just needed to know who it was. I gave him Jonathan Blakely's name. When we entered the back room, I felt a pang of disappointment. I quickly scanned the arcades along the walls, but didn't see anything particularly salacious. A few older games, 1 or 2 had recently broke and were removed from the game floor. There were 3 separate doors to some further rooms on the side. I guess they might be bathrooms or an office area. There was also another boy about my age in the room. He was playing one of the Wild West shooter games. Stanley walked me over and introduced the boy as Ian. Ian greeted me with a casual, "Hey," and a smile. He lowered his plastic red gun, looked at Stanley, and said, "Now that there's another kid, can we play that special game?" Stanley nodded his head slowly and deliberately. Yes, we could play that special game. Ian grabbed me by the arm and said, "You're going to love this one. I heard all about it." Stanley asked me if I wanted to play the special game. Yes, I want to play. Stanley told me to wait while he grabbed Ian by the shoulders and led him into one of the side rooms. He closed the door behind them and I waited. Stanley hadn't given me any instructions. Were they going to be 1 minute or 20? Was I allowed to play the other games while I waited? I couldn't exactly process what was happening, so I just stood there staring at the closed door. I listened very carefully and I thought I heard their voices behind the door. Maybe some jostling. After a few minutes, Stanley bounded out of the room and said, "Okay, let's get you set up in your cockpit." I was so impressed. I had seen a picture of a cockpit simulator in a gamer's magazine, but I never thought I would actually get to play one. Stanley opened a different door next to the one Ian had gone into. He motioned for me to go inside. As I walked past Ian's door, I saw it was cracked open slightly, and I caught a quick glimpse of Ian sitting in the cockpit mechanism, wearing a black helmet with a dark-tinted visor. A similar mechanism waited inside my room. I climbed into the chair and Stanley adjusted the safety harness straps around my chest. He put a black helmet over my head, like a real fighter pilot wears. It took him a while to get everything properly adjusted. I sat in a large metal frame with a well-padded seat and a monitor in the front. Overhead fluorescent lights illuminated the room. The chair had joystick-style controls in each hand. Stanley left me alone in the room and closed the door behind him. Then, the game started. I heard Ian's voice through the speakers.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I could hear him. It was really cool, almost like walkie-talkies, but the graphics were much less impressive than the rest of the setup. Unambitious green squares and circles floated around on a simple black background. I giggled and told Ian that I could probably draw something better on my Commodore 64 at home. The green lines began rotating as a woman's pre-recorded voice came through the headphones. Player 1, you are the triggerman. Pull the trigger before the countdown. You do not want to fail. The screen displayed a 15 in big block letters. Then it changed to 14, then 13. The countdown was on. My favorite type of games are the ones that don't make any effort to explain themselves. You just figure them out as you go along.
Who's player 1?
I asked. Ian didn't know. When I grabbed both joysticks, I was surprised that they didn't swivel, and they each only had one button. I clicked the buttons, but the voice continued counting down. 8, 7.
I don't think I'm player 1.
I told Ian.
My trigger doesn't do anything. I'm trying,
Ian said, and halfway through his sentence, I felt a jolt of static electricity run through me.
Youch!
Ian called through the headphones.
Are you okay?
I responded.
No, something messed up with my seat. I got shocked when you did that.
After the shock, the counter reset to 15 and began counting down the seconds again. And then louder, I yelled,
Stanley, this thing's broken.
The timer was at 10. My safety harness wouldn't unlock. Ian started protesting.
Hey, Stanley, something is wrong with this machine. It accidentally shocked him.
7, 6, 5. Between calling the numbers, the woman's computer voice said, The game must go on. You do not want to fail. The shock was even bigger this time. 15, 14. The first shock didn't really hurt. It just scared me. This one actually stung. I kept trying to unbuckle the seat.
Ian, it shocks me when you push the button. The shocks are getting much stronger. Don't push it anymore.
And then much louder I yelled,
Stanley, I want out!
Ian promised me he wouldn't shock me anymore. 6, 5. The game must go.
Stanley, let me out!
3, 2, 1. Another shock came, stronger than the previous two.
I didn't do that one,
Ian called out, and then the computer made the noise that every 80s arcade game makes when your turn is over. I breathed a sigh of relief, but only for 1 second. Player 2, you are the triggerman. Pull the trigger before the countdown. You do not want to fail. 15, 14. Ian figured out the real nature of the game before I did.
Please don't pull the trigger,
He pleaded, but I was still in denial.
Maybe it was just a malfunction with my unit. Maybe it won't shock you if I pull the trigger.
Ian said it couldn't be a malfunction. I still kept bargaining, however.
But if I don't pull, it will shock you. Yeah,
He responded.
but then we can take turns taking the shocks. It's not fair for one person to take all of them.
5, 4, 3.
Maybe it won't shock you.
I said. I squinched my eyes and squeezed the trigger as Ian yelled in pain through the headphones. I could tell from his screaming that his shock was as bad or worse than either of the ones I got. The countdown started over again.
That hurt. I can take a few more, but I'm going to need a break. You have to give me a break.
I waited until the last possible nanosecond before pulling the trigger, but I pulled it.
Ugh, it's getting worse. Did you pull it?
15, 14. Yes.
Please, stop.
As a 10-year-old, I had a surprising grasp of the game. I was terrified, but I knew what had to be done.
If I give you control, how do I know you won't keep pulling the trigger? If I lose control, you'll keep shocking me to protect yourself. Then I would be the one begging you to switch control. You'd shock me to death. I won't. I promise, I won't. I gave you control earlier. I just need a break. Please, take 2 little shocks and I'll give you control again. Please.
Between tears, I said,
No. You won't. It hurts too much. You won't switch.
I pulled the trigger. His scream was deafening.
I'm so sorry, Ethan.
I needed him to forgive me for what I was doing. I heard Ian thrashing against his restraints.
Stop it! I want out! Let me out! Don't do this to me!
I screamed too.
Stanley! Stanley, stop this game!
We both begged as the seconds ticked down. The door to my room stayed closed. When the countdown was almost over, I shocked him again and again. Every 15 seconds, the shocks kept getting stronger and the screams got louder. I could hear him screaming through the walls in addition to the headphones. I still think about this every day of my life. At a certain point, the lights would dim when I pulled the switch, and I could hear the crackle of electricity through the wall. My memory of this is so vivid. 30 years later, most of my nightmares involve flickering and dimming fluorescent lights. His screams turned to whimpers as the electrical current crushed him. Then, he stopped making any noise. The lights dimmed and hissed with a click of the button, but no human sound came from the other room.
Ian, can you hear me? Is he alive?
I didn't dare give up control. I kept shocking him until the computer voice said, "Game over." The seatbelt clicked open and I burst through the door of the simulator room into the room where Ian was. His door was locked and I banged on it. Stanley came out and said, "Son, I need you to come in this next room." No, I am not going in that next room. No! I sprinted to the door that led back to the lobby, but it was locked. I was screaming and yanking on the door, weeping tears of terror as Stanley approached. He tried to grab my arm, but I jerked away again. "Son, Ian's okay." And magically, Ian was okay. His door opened and he stood there. Stanley continued, "Ian's an actor. This was an experiment. This store has been funded by several groups that value traditional morality to see how regularly playing violent video games impacts moral behavior. We wanted to see how far you would push the experiment." He had a cash bill in hand. He knelt down beside me and said, "Here's your $10 for your participation in the experiment. If 5 of your friends say that you told them about the back room, we'll give you an extra $10. He explained that I had to keep the nature of the experiment secret so that I didn't tamper with the results. The next day at school, my friend Paul stopped me. I was still in a daze. I was still in shock. He didn't seem to notice, however. Hey, I was at the mall, and I saw Stanley lead you to the inner room. What was it like? Were there any naked games there? I heard there's a flight simulator that'll lift you off the ground. I heard it feels like a roller coaster. I was almost catatonic. I stared out through the window to a bird in the grass, picking at a worm. It ripped it out of the ground in one motion. It was awesome, I said. Maybe he'll let you in sometime.